I was an avid radio music listener. I love listening to the radio and memorizing songs and listening to my favorite musicians, singers, Al B. Sure, Whitney Houston, Cool and the Gang, in the 1980s. And I remember when we were living in our first house, and that's when, of course they still do it today, I'm sure. The DJs, they'll are the radio announcer, they'll talk about the singer and give you some news about what's going on in their lives. And I remember one day, just as I was finished listening to a song, they said that the announcer had said something about this singer. And I I remember thinking or wondering if money made people evil. And that question would live in my subconscious for a little while. And I remember, fast forward in 2000, what was that, 13, 11, 12, 13, when I was writing principles I learned from my mother. And in there I wrote that money is not the root of evil. It is the intention of the individual that has it, because money is an inanimate object, just like this desk, table I'm sitting at. If I, you know, raise this table up and I just start hitting and stumping it, it's not the desk that is evil, right? We can clearly see that it is my intentions. What are my intentions? What thoughts am I having that is causing me to do this? And often we can see that, right? And often still we blame people and things for situations that occur. We blame money and say, because of them having all the money, now they can do all this, and at least they're doing things that they would not have normally done. Whether it's smoking or drinking a lot heavily or abusive behavior. If it wasn't for the money, if it wasn't for them being famous, then they would not be doing what they're doing. But when we put the blame on something that is outside of us for what we are doing, we have closed the door to really getting to the root of our behaviors. And those are the thoughts that we hold in our mind and in our hearts. There's a Bible verse that out of the heart flows the issues of life, right? Corruption. And we hear more about that in the New Testament. I was looking for that. I was talking to my husband this weekend, and I knew there was something else that specifically said, what those issues are: corruption, greed, slander, all of those things that we see in the world that are part of the cycle of pain come from the heart. And it flows into what I'm going to talk about today, which is character before purpose. That I believe character is actually part of our purpose here on earth. We have these divine gifts and talents that are in us. They're innate. They're part of our spiritual blueprint. And we also have our genetic blueprint, that there are, things that we have from our grandfather or grandmother or our great great grandfather, just historical blueprint, our family history, our lineage that we have inside of us, right? These genes, these genetic blueprint, and we can turn them on and turn them off as need be. And I've talked about, as we go along in earth, we are to align with our spirits, our personality and our spirit to align, that nothing overcomes us, that our spirit is divine, it is unmovable, it's unchangeable, this divine spirit, but we have this personality that we basically need to check, right? And my husband, my son actually was asking me today. We had a conversation. He had asked me about someone who is really famous. Tamika, Mom, did you hear? He didn't say Tamika, but he said, Mom, did you hear about this person? And I was kind of shocked, taken back that he had heard about it. But it wasn't for me to get lost in the conversation, but to actually enhance the conversation of the truth that, often we go for the fancy cars, the lifestyle, the the one thing that's going to bring us money and influence and prosperity and wealth, but we don't deal with those wounds, those unhealed wounds. Because, and I heard another famous person, I think it was Tony Robinson, that said, and it was around 2017 or 18 when I was listening to his CD, and it was after I had written that in the book that my mom that I was sharing my mother's principles, and he confirmed it. He said uh, that if being famous, money can actually bring out, we can allow it to bring out the worst in us, and that whatever it is that we're doing was already there. And that speaks to the character of the person, those unhealed wounds that we are still dealing with. Many, often people say that, he acted like a child and he's having a temper tantrum, and very well may be because a lot of those unhealed wounds still stem from our childhood. The not getting what we want, and um, not feeling loved, and insecurities, and not feeling good enough. And it's almost like it grows these seeds, what I'm talking about, the seeds we plant series, that those insecurities, those, they may be cute when people are children and you see them, you're like, oh, and then you have some parents, grandparents, that say, you better get a hold on that, because he can grow up and he can be a really, really something with that. And it's true, because it may seem like it's not so bad, or it can be cute in children and babies when they take someone else's bottle, or when they, when they just do steal things from other people, or when they say certain words, and we're like, oh, no, you can't. And but when they get older, we have a more experiences involved. We have experience that could have fed the rage, could have fed the low self-esteem, the greed, the hatred, the bitterness, the anger, the shame, the doubt, all those things that happen over time that feeds it. And it's almost like that low insecurity becomes a monster of a thing. We're dealing with monsters now. We're dealing with an overgrown garden full of weeds, negative weeds that are choking, literally choking the life out of who we are at the core. And I've been watching, my husband has been watching some Michael Jackson, old videos. And it really hurts my heart when I see famous, when I think about it, and I see people that had so much gift, so much gift, shown gift, and talent. Hearing about Michael Jackson, how he wanted to go big and just do things, and his concerts, and hearing his voice so angelic. And I wrote a poem about him, and just really fascinated by his ease of dancing and movement, and his voice, and how natural it seemed. And you think about Prince, and you think about Whitney Houston, and I was torn up when I heard about Gerald Levert, and then still hearing something about his story and his life, and hearing about that from many of known people that showed great talent, express their gifts and their spiritual gifts and abilities, yet still they were hurting on the inside. They were literally dying on the inside until they came to their physical death. And how it is so important that we look past, avoid the temptation to blame things on money and fame and any other thing, but to really see the hearts of people, to really take a step back, I believe, as parents and caregivers, and ask ourselves, what are we sowing in our children? Are we sowing the importance of having a strong foundation, that even throughout the storms of life, the storms that may come, the bullying type behavior, the pushing, the kicking, the slander, even when you become someone of influence and fame, how those negative words, those projections of pain come out howling through people's voices, through their actions, that how do you withstand that? And that's one of the screenplays I actually wrote about Nicolette, and how the record producer was like, to basically told her, you have to stand on something because basically this music industry can shake you down. And that's what she kind of experienced during her desire to become famous, to have a man that loves her. And often we can hear that in our children, I just want this money. I just want to be rich. And I think it's important for us to slow them down in thought, in our words, because what we say, what we teach, because we're always teaching our children through our actions, through our words, we teach who we are in essence. So those beliefs, those thoughts, if we feel the same way about money, if we feel the same way about people's lives and how we should be divisive, and if there's hatred, there's shame, there's guilt, we continue that cycle of pain until we awaken and say, this is not who we are, who we truly are. This is not who I am, that I deserve better. I deserve to have a prosperous life. I deserve to enjoy the fruit of my labor. And once we really know that we are not here to impose our will on others, to um, demoralize others. We have so much of that in the world when we talk about slavery and indentured servant, and it's really hurt both sides, because you have one side that feel like I am, the master of the human race and I deserve it, and then when they don't get it, then you start seeing hatred and bitterness, in some, not in everyone, but you start seeing that backlash and that. And then we have another side that I am unworthy, and your history, your family history, and there's this bitterness that can arise in us and be angry because of how our forefathers, how they were treated, how our grandparents, struggled to have their identity, to read, to have an education. And I don't bring this up um, to entice or to bring bitterness, but it's more about talking about it to understand it, to understand that what much of what we've done, much of this cycle of pain has hurt all races, right? It has hurt all genders, all religions, all cultures. It's affected them in some way, right? How, as we look at someone who is different in the color, the shape, um, in their traditions and their social economic status, and how we look at them. And character, when we talk about character, character sees that but looks beyond that. Character looks at the heart of the individual. Character focuses on building a strong foundation from the inside out, because it knows that it's not about getting rich. When I think about the Bible verse, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all things shall be added onto you, Matthew 6:33, I think about that has to do with our purpose. Because if we are nourishing, embodying this gift, this divine gift that we have, and we're nourishing it in a healthy way, one that does not demoralize or uh, sees someone else as less than what we are, but we see ourselves as equal with one another, no one greater, no one lesser. That when we nourish that and we express it, I believe in that divine way, we are seeking the kingdom of God. And you think about, well, what about people that are rich? God doesn't withhold; He gives to the people that are doing right, as well as the people that aren't doing well with their gift. But life is not about just becoming rich or becoming famous. It's more about really aligning with aligning with this divine gift and expressing it in such a way that it honors all of us as one. It honors the uniqueness in all of us, yet still from um, this macrocosm of spirit, of divineness, of infinite intelligence. And it's not about what you call it. It's more of, again, what do you believe in? Do you believe in good? Do you believe in evil? So when we sit down with our children, and actually anything that starts with our children has to start with us. So when we sit down, we look at our lives. Have we, even if we weren't raised to have a foundation of character, how does that show in how we cope with life? How does that our character show in how we speak to others, how we treat them? The morality, do we see them as equal? Do we see them as less than what we are? Do we see them as having being an expression of God, of our creator? Do we see the interconnectedness that we all do have? Because at the base of who we are, at our beliefs, actually, the base of our beliefs, these beliefs that we have held on to, that we've gotten in somewhere, somehow, some way, at the base of those forms our character, forms what we're going to teach the next generation. And one of the things that I started, gosh, as with my children, is talking about virtues. I for when they were born, because of what I experienced, I was telling them, your body is your body, respect other people's body, respect your body. um, and then during COVID, it was an opportunity for us to really start doing devotion and really start getting positive books. Miles Monroe devotional book, The Power of Positive Thinking, Norman Vincent Peale, James Allen, As a Man Thinketh, and just really start looking at virtues. I had printed off a list of 52 virtues, which I thought I was going to do when I was working, when I was actually going to church in Ohio. And I was going to help. I was actually helping with children Bible school, but we end up leaving that to go to Oregon. And during COVID, I actually used the sheet and started talking about the 52 virtues. It's actually somewhat tearing up, but I restarted that this year because I think it more than anything, to resist blaming and shaming and guilt, and really look at ourselves individually and look at our families, the children that we're raising, whether you're a caregiver, adoptive, foster, primary, biological parents, whatever, uncles, aunties, whatever it is that your role is in life, your roles, and if you are influencing the next generation, how are you helping them to build character? How are you? I've heard many basketball players say, that one in particular, that he made sure he was still there to see his children growing up. What do you put first? Do you put doing the work and making the money first? Because we've seen that. We've seen where children have committed suicide and over, drinking, excessive drinking. We've seen alcoholism. We've seen so much, people misusing and abusing others' bodies because of we feel the need that we have to go out here and really make something of ourselves, right? That our children get left behind. They don't know how to read. I've seen it. I've heard children read, and parents say that, and it's not to blame, but some say, they sit next to me and I just tell them to read silently, and I know the desire to want to give our children a great home, to give them a future, to help them, to give them make sure they're prepared for life. But what better way to prepare them than to give them principles and tools that they can use to stand on when those storms come, when they're no longer seen as famous, when people slander them and talk about them, when the money comes, what will they do with it? Will they build and create positive things, influences, or will they start wanting to dominate others because they felt dominated, because they felt like, they're still dealing with the hurt, the unhealed wounds, the negative growth that they have in their minds and their inner garden from previous experiences that they had not put in a healthier perspective. There's too much that's going on for us to sit back and not really look at our character, to not really look at, what am I doing? When you think about the uh, King Richard and the story, and I'm not sure how much of that was true or false, but one of the things, he didn't want them to get into coaching, to playing tennis and competition, he wanted them to he didn't want them to be so ingrained in that, and it was an example where someone had was caught, I think drinking, excessively drinking, and that really got to him. He said, I don't want my daughters to end up like that. They're going to have their lesson, they're going to have their education, and I say with that, they're going to have standards and principles that they live by. And what have you learned that have really helped you to cope with life events, to not blame, to not feel shame and guilt? What have you learned that need to be shared with your children or share with the next generation? So I just think there should be more of an effort to really doing building character, building strong foundations. And I do it with principles, I do it with virtues. What does assertiveness mean? What does caring mean? What does commitment mean? What does compassion mean? What does reliability mean? And so I was thinking about doing a series within a series, but really the seeds we plant, the essence of it, when I talk about conviction and I talk about, I've used these 52 virtues, is that that's all about building character, building the foundation. And I think it's more of rebuilding. It's resowing the seeds that we already have inside of us. Because I believe when it is true that we're made in the image of our creator, we don't have to go out and look how to be compassionate or look how to be loving, but to really go inside and believe that what we have is in us. We can use events, we can use discussions to help renew that sense of compassion, renew that sense of kindness, use examples, life examples, but know that it already resides in us. And as parents, as caregivers, our job, our role, part of our purpose is to help our children remember who they are, and as well as helping them to do the work that they're here to do. But along their purpose, we are grounding, replanting seeds that they already have. And as we teach, so we become. So I see it as a win-win situation, because when we teach kindness, we reinforce kindness within ourselves. And so I just wanted to share that, because it's so common to go after this thing, but what are we sacrificing when we go after this thing? Because I can guarantee you, whatever we're sacrificing, we're going to have to front it. We're going to have to face it at some point in our lives. If we're not willing to face it when our children are younger, we're going to face it when they're 18, 19, 20, 21, maybe even earlier than 18, 16, 17, teenage pregnancy. So much that is going on that our children, they need us. We need ourselves to reinforce these virtues we have, and we need to reinforce them within our children. I know this is a little bit longer than what I normally do record, and I feel like there's so much more that I want to say about character, and we'll save them for a latter time. But to really think about, use the examples that we're seeing in the world, the issues that we're seeing in the world, the lives that are taken too soon that we're seeing in the world, bullying, the domination of others, inappropriate body use and inappropriate language and violation of bodies, to use that example as we need to get to the root of this. There are some issues that we have with character, and we need to talk about it. We need to open this discussion up, and we need to reevaluate what we are teaching through words and through action our children, and what we're allowing them to be around. Because as you know, environments influence, they influence us. And so what are our children's hearing every day in school, in daycare, wherever they may be? Are we paying attention to our children's environment? Are we protecting their innocence, not suffocating them? But if there's a mean for us to speak up, because it's something that we do not tolerate, that we want to protect their innocence, we want to sow seeds of virtues, we want them to be able to withstand the experiences that they have, to stand firm with a solid foundation, that I think it's important that we also ensure that the environments they're in also to align with our purpose for our children's life, for the next generation. All right, I'll talk to you guys soon. As always, take care of yourself. Make this lifetime great. You still can, no matter what you've been through, because a change of action starts with a change of thought and breaking the cycle of pain and creating a generational cycle of love.